Room 733, the suicide room. That's what they called Room 733. As if I didn't have enough to worry about on my first day as a freshman. We had assigned to dorm room 734, which it turns out wasn't one of the nice add-on rooms in the South Hall. No, we found ourselves in the older wing of the building on the 7th floor. I wasn't too bummed out, though. At least they'd honored my request to room with my best friend. Lydia and I spent most of the morning moving ourselves in. By the time our resident advisor came by, I was taping up posters, and Lydia was reading. "Hi girls, I'm Beth," chirped the bubbly blonde girl as she bounded into our room. "I'll be your RA this year." "Hi," I nodded at her. "Wow, you girls really work fast," she said, taking in our made beds and hung up clothes. Beth picked up a drawing of Cthulhu that Lydia had done over the summer. She turned it sideways, studying it. "Is this the Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean?" Lydia glared at her over the top of her book. "So anyway," the RA continued, "I know our hall isn't as new as the South Hall, but trust me, there's a lot of history here. This building is almost 60 years old." "Yes, I can see that," I said, looking around. "The rooms are pretty small." "Well, people were smaller in the 50s. Beth shrugged. "Really?" Lydia said flatly. "Yep, really." Beth pursed her lips and just continued to stand there, while the room filled with awkward silence. "So," I said, "the corner room next to us, 733, is it? It looks a lot bigger than our room. Is anyone assigned to that room, or could we maybe—" "Oh, you don't want that room," Beth interrupted. "There were a couple suicides in there, a hanging and a jumper if I remember right. They're not assigning anyone to that room. Anyway, I'd just like to remind you that this is an all-girls floor and guys are not allowed up here after 11. Before we could reply to her, Beth clapped her hands and with a quick, "Well, nice meeting you," she skipped out of the room. Lydia dropped her book on the bed and stared out into the hall. "I hate her. Did you hear that bomb she fucking dropped? I'm going to call her dumbshit Beth." "Lydia, seriously. Suicides?" "Oh, Becca, relax. Every college campus has a few suicides." "Yeah, but in the same room?" Lydia sighed. "Really, who cares? It's not our room." "Yeah, I guess." I turned to study the little window in our room. Can you imagine climbing out of that tiny window and jumping? You'd be alive for at least 5 seconds before you hit the ground. "Oh, fuck, Becca, can you not?" Lydia glanced at the window and visibly shuddered. "You know I fucking hate heights, and just talking about that shit is raising my blood pressure." "We could always move into the suicide room," I teased her. "That one has a window on each wall." "Fuck you." Okay. But seriously, think about it. It would take a lot of commitment to squeeze out of that tiny window." "Yeah, well, remember, people were apparently smaller back then," Lydia mumbled as she pushed her bed further away from the window. Since Lydia was an outgoing and friendly person, we made friends at lightning speed. There were a lot of parties in those first few weeks, at one of which Lydia inevitably met a guy. I'd known the girl since we were in diapers, so I fully anticipated her having a boyfriend by the end of September. His name was Mike, and he wasn't anything special. Just your standard frat pledge douche canoe. After about a month on campus, the novelty of college started wearing off. Lydia and I found our stride, and we spent more weekends studying than drinking. Midterms were coming up in a couple weeks, and I was determined to maintain a 4.0 GPA throughout my freshman year. One night in early October, I was woken up by a loud, grinding sound. I sat up in bed and strained to hear it again. Lydia was also wide awake and listening. "Slam, what the fuck," she mouthed to me. It wasn't unusual for there to be noise in the hallways since other people came in at all hours of the night. But this sound had definitely come from next door. The corner room. "Grind, is that—" "Yeah," Lydia whispered. "That's the window next door." At Lydia's insistence, we kept our window closed at all times. However, there was no mistaking the sound of the window in room 733 being opened and closed again at regular intervals. "Slam. Who's in there?" Lydia shrugged. "Is someone fucking with us? Is this like initiation?" Lydia raised her eyebrow at me. "Initiation to what?" "I don't know. College? Maybe they're hazing the freshmen?" Grind, it opened. "Who is hazing freshmen?" I shrugged. "Slam!" It shut. "Becca, I love you, but that was fucking stupid." I threw a pillow at her. Well, whoever it is, go tell them to knock it the fuck off. Me? I'm not risking being thrown out a window. Grind. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm an art major. You're a political science major. You go lay down the law. Fuck that. Then call dumb shit Beth. Isn't this the kind of nonsense she should deal with? Slam. I'm not calling her. Don't you put that evil on me. Fine, Lydia whispered loudly. Then we'll just have to ignore it. I have class at 7:30, I whispered. Grind. Then do something. Ugh. I got out of bed and stomped to the door, threw it open dramatically and went down the hall to pound on the door to room 733, which simply said, supply room. People are trying to sleep. Please fucking stop, I said when there was no answer. Slam. Dude, seriously. I sighed. I stepped back from the door and immediately noticed problem. Room 733 was padlocked shut from the outside. I hurried back to my room. What happened? Lydia asked. I'm not going anywhere near that fucking room again. It's locked from the outside. I don't know how anybody could get in there. So, you're saying it's a spooky ghost? She laughed. No, I'm saying there is creepy shit going on inside a room colloquially called the suicide room. Lydia scoffed and rolled over to go back to sleep. You should have been a drama major. We didn't hear the window next door again that night, but the next morning you could clearly see from outside that both windows in the corner room were now wide open. I watched the windows on room 733 for an entire week, but they remained open. Occasionally at night I thought I could hear a noise next door like marbles dropping and rolling across the floor. Since it never woke Lydia up, I didn't bother to say anything. One afternoon I was alone in the dorm editing notes on my laptop. I had my headphones in, but the music wasn't loud enough to cover the noise of someone knocking on the door. Come in, I said without looking up from the screen. A moment went by, and then I heard the knocking again. I jerked my earbuds out and slammed the laptop closed. I turned around. Come. What the fuck? The door to the hallway was wide open. I'd left it open on purpose since Ian, a junior I was dating, was supposed to be stopping by. I heard the knocking again from behind me and literally jumped out of my chair. It had come from the other side of the room, the closet door. It was the closet that shared a wall with room 733. Lydia, you're not fucking funny. Nothing. Lydia, I swear to God, I will punch you in your face. Silence. I walked over to the closet door and grasped the handle. Lydia, you're a fucking what? Her voice came from the doorway, behind me. I let go of the doorknob and stumbled back, wide-eyed. Lydia threw her stuff on the bed and turned to me, crossing her arms. I'm a fucking what? I thought you were hiding in the closet, I said, lamely. What? Why? Because someone was knocking on the door. Jesus, Becca. Lydia rubbed her forehead and walked over to the closet, throwing open the door. There was nothing there but clothes and boxes. She made a swipe of her arm as if to say, What now? I swear, Becca, there's no one here. I know what I heard. We glared at each other until our little standoff was interrupted by the timely arrival of Ian. He immediately sensed the tension in the room. Hi, ladies. What's new? I gave my roommate a hostile look. There's strange shit is going on in that room next door, but that's not new. Which room? 735? Or the empty one? The empty one, Lydia emphasized. Tree. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's the suicide room. Right, we heard about the deaths. I sat down on my bed. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. 3 suicides all in one dorm room. 3? Lydia raised her eyebrow. We were told there were 2. Well, there were a couple people in the 70s and then some guy about 10 years ago. He jumped out the window. Lydia and I both shuddered. Although she was much worse, we were both terrified of heights. A falling death was about the worst thing I could think of. I will admit that 3 suicides in the same dorm room is fucking disturbing, Lydia said in an apologetic tone. Yeah, I heard there's something in that room, Ian said. Like what? No one knows. But every year someone has a new theory. Usually right around Halloween something gets published in the campus paper. Whatever is in there, though, it ain't friendly. So, has anyone ever killed themselves in the neighboring rooms, like this one? Nah, just 733. Honestly, I was surprised when I heard they were opening the North Hall this year. They told us we were the biggest incoming freshman class in 20 years, I said absent-mindedly. Yeah, I heard that too, You know you could request a room change. Ian sat down on the bed next to me, and I leaned against his shoulder. Yeah, but they wouldn't keep us together. Lydia cut in. Becca and I have been best friends for 15 years. We can't room with other people. So should we just keep living here, next to Satan? I glanced at the closet door again. Lydia shrugged. At least we'll have some stories to tell after graduation. These aren't the kind of stories I want to tell. Few days later, Lydia began to believe my closet story. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering. I looked over at Lydia, who was already staring at me with wide eyes. She slowly brought a finger to her lips. I listened intently, trying to hear what the voice was saying and where it was coming from, but I couldn't understand even one word. I got out of my bed and tiptoed over to Lydia's. The whispering was definitely louder over there, but then she shared a wall with room 733. I listened harder. Never. Taken mouths of fools. What the hell? Lydia leaned over and put her ear up to the wall. The whispers suddenly stopped and I leaned closer. Suddenly there was a loud bang from the other side. Lydia immediately recoiled and clutched her ear in pain. Someone was in there. Suddenly, more angry than scared, I again threw open our door and stomped over to the supposedly empty supply room. I banged on the door loudly, not caring who else I woke up at this point. "Are you fucking kidding me?" I yelled at the door. "This shit isn't funny anymore! Come out of that fucking room, you asshole!" Silence. And then the doorknob started to turn. I don't know what I'd expected to happen, but it wasn't that. Backed up so far from the door that I ran into the opposite wall. When the handle had turned all the way down, something started to push from the other side. The door groaned loudly, but the locks held. I held my breath until the pressure on the door subsided and the handle slowly returned to its normal position. I noticed Lydia peeking her head out of our room. She held up her hands as if to say, "What happened?" "Someone thinks they're funny," I answered her out loud. She shook her head and disappeared back into our room. I knelt down on the floor and brought my head down to the carpet, peering under the door crack. It was the first time I had seen into the corner room. Room 733 was definitely a supply closet. There were chairs stacked along one wall and bed frames along the other. A few rotting mattresses were piled under one of the windows, and a thick layer of dust covered everything in the room. The windows were absolutely huge, which was something you couldn't really tell by looking up at the building. They were open, as always, and I could definitely see how someone could easily climb through them to the outside ledge. The room didn't look like it had been disturbed in a couple of decades, which sent a shudder racking through my body. The moonlight, which had been providing enough light to see into the room, suddenly vanished, and I saw only pitch black inside. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my night vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, a large yellow eye was looking back at me, only a few inches away from my face on the other side of the door. I screamed and woke up half the dorm. There was no denying that things were escalating. The next morning, Lydia and I put in dorm change requests with resident services and hoped for the best. In the meantime, we agreed to never be alone in our dorm room at night. Either we both spent the night at home, or neither of us did. We started spending most nights with our respective boyfriends. I told Ian everything that had happened, and he suggested I maybe talk to the campus paranormal society. I hesitantly made an appointment, and Lydia and I met with a small, cleanly dressed kid named Craig and 4 of his colleagues the following Tuesday. We told them everything we could remember, every incident, no matter how small. Craig and the 4 other members of the paranormal society sat quietly and took notes for half an hour. It wasn't until we finished that anyone spoke. "Is that all?" Craig asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "Would you mind waiting out in the hall for a few minutes so that I may confer with my colleagues?" "Sure." Lydia smiled indulgently and stood up. "Whatever you need." The door had barely shut behind us when Lydia snorted and rolled her eyes. "Let's go!" "Go where?" I asked. "Lydia, come on, we need help. I am freaking out. We haven't stayed one night in our dorm since Thursday, so this isn't something we can just brush off." "Okay." She threw her hands up. "Let's hear what they have to say, and then we can go over to resident services and check on our move requests." We loitered out in the hallway for another 15 minutes before Craig came out and asked us to come back and take a seat. with all the pomp and circumstance of a meeting of Parliament. Craig cleared his throat and made his diagnosis. What you're dealing with, ladies, is a very angry ghost. Is that your professional opinion, Craig? Lydia said. I shot her a look. Yes, he stuttered. A vengeful spirit. A spirit? I asked. I very much doubted that that's what we were dealing with. Yes, answered one of the not Craigs. That's ghost to the layperson. Jesus Christ, Lydia groaned and rubbed her temples. Mistaking Lydia's frustration with despair, Craig rushed right into his speech. Don't be afraid, ladies, we're going to take care of you. It's true that spirits can be quite a headache if you don't know how to exorcise them, which is why it's good you came to us. Suicides almost always result in angry ghosts. They need revenge. Revenge on whom? I asked. On other students. Perhaps this particular spirit was bullied into taking his own life, and now seeks to torment others. Listen. We can take care of this for you right away. All we ask is a small donation to the society, Craig continued. We honestly didn't realize that room was having this much activity. It's really very exciting. Great, well, thank you for your time, Lydia said, as she grabbed my hand and pulled me out of my chair. Do you want to set something up for this weekend? Craig asked. Tell you what, we'll call you. Lydia hurried me out of the room, wearing a weary look, and we didn't speak again until we were almost to the admin building. That was a waste of time, she said. Look, I'm not disagreeing with you, but… Becca, tell me you didn't honestly buy into that. So you don't think it's I was having trouble even saying the word. It sounded so ridiculous. Ghost? Well, I don't fucking know, but neither do they. That guy had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. I pulled my hood lower over my eyes as we stepped into line at the resident services desk. Let me put it this way, Lydia continued. They're playing Ghostbusters, and we're living the fucking Exorcist. Fine, I sighed. Then what do you want to do? Just keep sleeping at Mike and Ian's until we get reassigned? I just want this to end. Lydia crossed her arms and stared straight ahead. We all wanted this to end. Even if living next to that fucking room wasn't scary, it was sure as hell distracting. All right. Well, I mean, we're probably safe during daylight hours, so as long as we don't spend nights there, we should be okay. Our room is only ghost adjacent after all, and our new assignments will come through soon. I checked my watch. Fuck, it's almost 2. Shit. Really? I gotta go. Mike got accepted to Sigma Chi, and he's getting initiated today. Oh yeah. I forgot he rushed. The girl at the desk waved us forward. I hadn't even realized we'd reached the front of the line. Let me know what they say, Lydia said as she ran out the door. The girl at the desk eyed me suspiciously as I approached. Hi, You're the girl trying to move out. Of 734 and Riley, aren't you? She'd caught me off guard. Yeah, one of them. How'd you know? Sorry, I overheard you. I also saw your file cross my desk a few days ago, and I gotta ask. Why are you looking to transfer rooms exactly? Was tired. I was beaten down. I didn't have the energy to think of a lie. Because shit is going on in the empty room next door, and it's really freaking us out. Noises, whispers, knocking. The other night I saw someone… You saw someone? Yeah. In room 733? Yeah. I looked under the door. There was definitely someone in there. The girl narrowed her eyes at me for a moment and then nodded for no particular reason. Well, your rooms aren't ready yet, but I've pushed them through as a priority. For right now you're stuck, though. There just isn't anywhere else to put you, I sighed. I'd figured as much. I'm Alice, she continued. And, look, I've actually done a lot of research on the Riley suicides, and I think I can help you. Or at the very least, offer some insight. Really? I asked hesitantly. Absolutely. I'm in Taylor Hall, room 310. I'll be back to my dorm by 4 today. Thanks. We just came from the Paranormal Society on campus. Ugh, say no more. Alice rolled her eyes. Yeah, so I'll definitely see you at 4. Great, Alice said and smiled. I was early to Taylor, but then so was she. I told our story for the second time that day, and Alice wasn't afraid to interrupt with questions, though her queries didn't betray her thoughts. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. I can't believe it, she shook her head.